Hi guys, this is Chimeze with ThoughtStack. With the vast adoption of GraphQL, we get to see new tools or products being released for GraphQL development almost every week. Today, we'll be looking at one of the two, which is Prisma. Prisma is an open source project created by the team that created GraphQL. So, in this video, we'll be looking at what is Prisma and how to get started with it. Prisma is a data layer that turns a database into a GraphQL API. We can look at it as a kind of ORM, but it is much more powerful than traditional ORMs. With Prisma, we get a server, which we can also call Prisma Server, that acts as a proxy for our database, and a high-performance query engine that runs on the server, which generates actual database queries for us. Also, we get a Prisma client, which we can use to interact with the server. Prisma also adds real-time event system to our database. That way, we can subscribe to database events in real time. An interesting thing about Prisma is that it works with both new and existing databases. So, in the case of an existing database, Prisma will generate the data model based on the database schema, using what is called introspect. Now, let's see how to get started with Prisma. To get started, we need to first install the Prisma CLI, which you can do through npm. Then we will install it globally. Once that is installed, we can now use the CLI to create a new Prisma service. That is init. Then the name we want for the service, which we will call Prisma-tags-manager. Next, we need to select if we want to connect to an existing database or a new database, or if we will be deploying to an existing Prisma server. It is important to note that Prisma requires Docker for local development. But in this video, we'll be using a demo server that is hosted on Prisma Cloud so as not to mess with Docker. So I will select demo server and enter. Note, you will be required to have an account with Prisma Cloud to make use of the demo server, and you will be redirected to login and grant the CLI permission to your account. I have already done that before, so that is why I am not getting the prompt. Next, we choose the region for the demo server. I'll be going with the first one. Then I will leave the default name, as well as the default stage. We are prompted to select the programming language for the generated Prisma client. So we'll select Prisma JavaScript client. The CLI has scaffolded our project for us and generated some files which we'll look at shortly. So now let's head into the new project. Then we need to deploy the Prisma service using Prisma deploy. What this does is deploy the Prisma service to the server. Also, we get two endpoints for our Prisma GraphQL database. The first one is for HTTP requests like queries and mutations, and the second one is for WebSockets for GraphQL subscriptions. Now, let's open the project in our preferred editor. I'll be using VS Code. Like I said earlier, the Prisma CLI did some scaffolding for us. So now let's take a look at the files that was created for us. First is the prisma.yaml file. This is the configuration file for Prisma. It contains everything that is required to start up the Prisma service, like the endpoint which we saw earlier, a data model which points to the data model.prisma file, which we will look at shortly, then the generated Prisma client. Because we selected JavaScript as the programming language for the Prisma client, the generator has been set to JavaScript-client. which will be generated inside a generated directory, as you can see. We are not meant to touch the generated files at all, as they will be regenerated once the data model changes. Finally, let's take a look at the data model.prisma file, which specifies the data model for our application that will be mapped to the database. That is, the data model.prisma file is used to define our database schema. As you can see, we already have a user type that was created for us by default. This will represent a user's table on our database with two columns, that is, the ID and the name. The unique directory is used to set the ID column to be unique for each record in the database, as well as set the ID column as the primary key of the table. Based on the types in the data model.prisma file, Prisma will expose a GraphQL API with CRUD and real-time operations. This GraphQL API is often referred to as Prisma API. Let's test out the Prisma API. For this, we'll be using the GraphQL playground. Prisma playground. If we take a look at the schema, we will see a list of operations that has been generated for us, like to get all users, to get a single user, to create a new user, update a new user, even for subscriptions. So let's try creating a new user. Create user. This will accept a data object that contains a name, and I want to return the ID and the name. And here we go, we have just created a new user. Now if we try fetching all the users that has been created, we should see our just created user. You are already beginning to see how powerful Prisma is, right? Without writing a single line of code, we already have this number of functionality. If all our GraphQL API will do is perform basic CRUD operations like this, then we would be fine with just the GraphQL API Prisma generated for us. But in most cases, we would want more than that. So we need to create a GraphQL server to handle our domain-specific logic, as well as integrate with third-party services. We will be using GraphQL Yoga to create our GraphQL server. So let's install it. We will also install an additional package, which is Prisma-client-lib. This is required to run the Prisma client that was generated for us. With that installed, let's head back to code and we'll create a new directory called src, and we will move the generated directory to the source directory. Then create a new index.js file. We will get back to this file later, but first, let's update the data model. So, we will be creating two new types, which will be project and task. This will be unique. To have a name, it should be a string. And lastly, to have some task, which will be an array of tasks, which is required as well. The outer exclamation mark indicates that the field is required, while the inner exclamation mark indicates that a task cannot be null. That is, we can't have an array that looks like this. So a task cannot be null, though the whole array can be empty. Lastly, we define the task type. Again, ID, which will be the type of ID, and it will be unique as well. To have a title, which will be a string and required. The task must belong to a project, which will be of type project, and it is required. Then lastly, it will have an is completed field, which will be a boolean that is required. And we will set a default value for the field, which will be false. It is important to note that the default value must always be in quotes, even for non-string types such as boolean and int. From the way our data model is structured, project and task have a one-to-many relationship. That is, a project can have many tasks due to the task field that is defined on the project type, as well as a task can belong to a project due to the project field that is defined on the task type. Since we have made changes to the data model, we need to redeploy the Prisma API. As you can see, the CLI has read our changes and deployed them to the server. Also, we need to regenerate the Prisma client. Cool. Now, we can start defining the schema that will make up our GraphQL API. So I'm going to create a new file, which I will call schema.graphql. First, we need to define the schema for the types inside the data model. So I'm going to copy this and paste over. Then I'll get rid of the directives. Then we can begin to define the query. We will define just two queries, which will be to fetch a project by its ID, project by ID, and it will accept the project ID, which will be ID, and it will be required, and it will return a project, and a query to fetch all tasks that have been completed, which we'll call completed tasks. Next, we define the mutations. A mutation to create a new project, which we'll call create project. And it will accept just one argument, which will be name, and it will be a string and required. Since the ID field will be auto-generated for us, then this will return back the project. Then another one to create a task. It will accept the title of the task. And the ID of the project. And return back the task. Lastly, a mutation to mark a task as completed. This will accept the ID of the task. And it will return back the task. Now, let's head back to the index.js file. First, we require GraphQL Yoga. Then we require the Prisma client. Which is inside the generated directory /prisma-client. Then we create a new server. Then we pass in our GraphQL schema. Then the resolvers, which we'll create shortly. Then lastly, the context, which will contain the Prisma client. We are passing the Prisma client to the context so we can make use of it inside our resolvers. Then we start the server .start. Then let's pull in the resolvers. And let's create the file. Then we export the resolvers. We will start with the query. Project by ID. Then we get the project ID from the argument. And Prisma from the context. So all we need to do is use the Prisma client to query our database. That is prisma.project. Then we want to fetch the project by its ID. Then finally we return it. Let's define the resolver to fetch the completed tasks. Prisma.tasks where is completed is equals true. And let's move on to mutation. Create project. Then we make use of the create project function on the Prisma client. This will accept an object containing the data to be inserted into the database, which will be the name of the project. Then we return it. Then we'll do something similar to create a task. The title of the task. Then we connect the task to a project. So what we are doing here is we are connecting the task to the project it belongs to through the specified project ID. Lastly, mark task as completed. All we need to do is update the task by setting is completed to true. We are using the update task function on the Prisma client. This accepts an object containing a where clause for fetching the task that needs to be updated and the data to update the task with, which will be is completed, set to true. Finally, let's define how to fetch the custom fields on our type. That is the tasks field. This will return all the tasks for a particular project. Then we get the project by its ID, which we can get from the root. That is root.id. Then we get all the tasks for that project. Then we'll do something similar for task. For the project field, again, we'll get the ID of the task from the root. Then we'll fetch the project that the task belongs to. Before we test this out, let me quickly point out something. Because we are getting a single project, we make use of the singular form of the model, which is project. And here, because we are getting a list of tasks, we make use of the plural form of the model, which is tasks. Same thing applies here and here. Now, let's test this out. We need to start the server node. Oops. GraphQL server is not a constructor. Let's see. Sorry, this should be GraphQL with capital QL. Try this. The server is now running and we can access it on localhost 4000. Now let's create a project. Create. Prisma.create is not a function. Let's see. Oh, this is not the latest Prisma client. The latest one has been generated outside the source directory. So let's delete this and update this to source/generated. We need to regenerate the Prisma client. And restart the server. Reload this and enter. So we have created a project. I'm going to copy the ID and open a new tab to create a task. Then the project ID will be the one I copied. Then I want to get the project name as well. And here we go. Now let's fetch a project by its ID. And we have the project and the task that belong to the project. For now, we only have just one. Now let's mark this task as completed. The task has been marked as completed. Finally, let's fetch all tasks that has been marked as completed. And here we go. So in this video, we have seen what Prisma is and how to get started with it by building a simple GraphQL server. If you would like to learn more about Prisma, do check their documentation. Which is really intensive. So that is it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any question or comments, please leave them in the comment section below. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so as to be updated once new videos are uploaded. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video.